She walked past him like he was invisible, the only woman in a room full of desperate socialites who didn't even glance his way. Luca Valenti, feared by half the city, found himself obsessed with a waitress who treated him like furniture. But when dangerous men started hunting Amara Brooks, demanding answers about a night she couldn't even remember, Luca discovered that protecting her meant risking everything he'd sworn never to feel again. What started as curiosity became possession, protection turned into passion, and suddenly the woman who ignored a mafia boss was about to become the one person he'd kill to keep safe. But Amara had no idea that accepting his help would drag her into a world where love and loyalty are paid for in blood, and where the price of safety might be her freedom. Subscribe and tell me where you're watching from, because this story is about to prove that sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do is fall in love with someone who's already lost everything. The alarm clock screamed at 5:30 a.m., but Amara Brooks was already awake. She had been staring at the ceiling for 20 minutes, doing math in her head. Rent was due in 5 days. Aunt Lila's heart medication cost $200. The electric bill sat on the kitchen counter, stamped red with final notice. She rolled out of bed and padded quietly to the kitchen. The phone rang before she could pour her coffee. "Brooks Pharmacy, calling for Lila Brooks," the voice said. "We're out of stock on her usual heart medication. The next shipment won't come until next week." Amara's stomach dropped. "What about the generic brand?" "We have that, but it's more expensive. $250 instead of $200. $50 extra dollars." $50 she didn't have. "Hold it for me," she said. "I'll pick it up tonight. Payment is due at pickup." "I understand." Amara hung up and stared at her reflection in the toaster. Dark circles under brown eyes. Hair pulled back in the same bun she'd worn for 3 years of double shifts. 29 years old and already tired down to her bones. But Aunt Lila needed her medicine. That was all that mattered. The shower was quick and cold. She dressed in black pants and a white shirt, the uniform of the Grand Harbor Hotel. Her phone buzzed with a text from Elena, her friend in events management. "Big gala tonight. Rich people spending money like water. Good tip night if you're lucky." Amara grabbed her purse and keys. Lucky. She needed more than luck. She needed a miracle. The Grand Harbor Hotel sat on the waterfront like a glass and marble crown. Amara had worked there for 18 months, long enough to know which guests tipped well and which ones grabbed at her when they thought no one was looking. She clocked in at the service entrance and grabbed her apron from the staff room. "Double shift today, Brooks," her supervisor called out. "We're short-staffed for the gala tonight." "No problem." No problem, even though her feet already hurt. No problem, even though she'd been working 6 days a week for months. Aunt Lila needed that medicine, and Amara would do whatever it took. The morning crowd was businessmen with phones glued to their ears and tourists complaining about everything. Amara smiled and poured coffee and counted every tip. By lunch, she had $47 in her pocket. Not enough. The afternoon brought prep work for the evening gala. Crystal glasses that cost more than her rent. Flowers that would die in 3 days but cost more than groceries for a month. Rich people's money spent on things that wouldn't last. At 4 o'clock, Eleanor found her in the service corridor. "Girl, you look exhausted," Eleanor said. She was tall and elegant, with dark hair always perfectly styled. Events management paid better than waiting tables. "When's the last time you took a day off?" "Can't afford to." "Lila's medicine again?" Amara nodded. She'd told Eleanor about her aunt's heart condition months ago. Elena was the only person at work who knew about her life outside these walls. "How much do you need?" "I'll figure it out." "That's not what I asked." $50, but I'll make it tonight. Rich people always tip better when they're drinking champagne." Elena reached for her purse, but Amara caught her wrist. "No, I'm not taking charity." "It's not charity. It's a friend helping a friend." "I said no." Elena studied her face. "You're too proud for your own good. Pride is all I've got left some days." That was the truth. Pride in Aunt Lila and the promise she'd made to her parents before they died. Take care of each other, no matter what. By 6 o'clock, the hotel had transformed. Security guards in black suits stood at every entrance. Photographers waited outside for the cars that cost more than most people's houses. Amara tied her apron tighter and checked her reflection one more time. The first guests arrived in waves of expensive perfume and laughter that didn't reach their eyes. Amara carried trays of champagne and hors d'oeuvres that had names she couldn't pronounce. She smiled and said, "You're welcome," and tried not to think about how much food was getting thrown away while she counted pennies for medicine. At 7:30, the energy in the room shifted. Conversations got quieter. Cameras flashed brighter. Amara was carrying a tray of champagne when she heard someone whisper, "He's here." She didn't look up. Rich people drama wasn't her business. But she noticed how the other staff members suddenly moved faster, how the security guards stood straighter. "That's Luca Valenti," whispered Maria, another waitress. "He owns half the city." Amara had heard the name before. Everyone in the city had. Business owner, they said. But the way people said it suggested there was more to the story. The way they looked over their shoulders when they talked about him. The way conversations stopped when he walked into a room. She still didn't look. A woman in a red dress that cost more than Amara's car brushed past her, aiming for wherever this Luca Valenti was standing. Then another woman, this one in silver. Then a third in black that hugged her like it was painted on. Amara focused on her tray, on not dropping the champagne, on the tips that would add up to $50 if she was careful and lucky, and smiled enough. She turned toward the bar and nearly walked into him. Dark hair, dark eyes. A suit that probably cost more than she made in 6 months. He was younger than she'd expected, maybe mid-30s, with the kind of face that made photographers fight for angles. The women she'd seen heading his way stood nearby, waiting for him to notice them. He was looking at her. Not through her like most rich guests did, not at her body like the grabby ones, at her face, like he was trying to figure out a puzzle. Amara met his gaze for exactly 2 seconds. Then she stepped around him and kept walking. Behind her, she heard one of the women in designer dresses laugh too loudly. "Luca, darling, you simply must try the champagne. It's from your vineyard in France, isn't it?" Amara reached the bar and traded her empty tray for a full one. When she turned around, he was still watching her. This time she didn't make eye contact. She had work to do. For the next hour, she felt him tracking her movement across the room. Not following, exactly. Just aware, like he was taking notes. It should have made her nervous, but mostly it was annoying. She didn't have time for rich men's games. At 9 o'clock, she was near the kitchen doors when she heard the crash. A champagne glass hit the marble floor and shattered. Then, shouting from the main entrance, security guards moving fast. The guests nearest the entrance started backing away. Someone screamed. Amara clutched her tray and tried to see what was happening. "Everyone stay calm," a security guard called out, but his hand was on his radio and his voice was tight. More shouting, the sound of something heavy hitting the ground. Then Elena appeared at her elbow. "Loading bay," Elena hissed. "Now!" "What's happening?" "I don't know, but security wants all staff out of the main room." Amara followed Elena through the service corridors to the loading bay behind the hotel. Other staff members were already there, huddled together and talking in worried whispers. Through the small window she could see police cars pulling up outside. Her phone buzzed. The pharmacy. She stepped away from the group and answered. "Miss Brooks? This is Brooks Pharmacy. About that medication hold for your aunt. Our system shows another order came in for the same prescription. Someone paid for it already." "That's impossible. I'm the only person authorized. The payment went through an hour ago. Full amount. You can pick it up any time." Amara stared at the concrete wall. "Who paid for it?" "I'm not sure. The order just says paid in full. Is there a problem?" "No. No problem, thank you." She hung up and tried to make sense of it. Aunt Lila's medicine was paid for. By someone. Someone who knew exactly how much it cost and exactly where to call. "Amara," she turned. Elena was watching her with concern. "Everything okay?" "Someone paid for Lila's medicine." "Who?" "I don't know." Elena's eyes narrowed. "That's weird. Who even knows about—" She stopped. "Oh, what?" "Nothing. Probably nothing. Come on, they're letting us back in." But Amara stayed in the loading bay for another minute, phone in her hand, trying to figure out how a stranger could have known exactly what she needed and exactly how to help. The answer, when it came, scared her more than the question. Back in the ballroom, the guests were settling down. Whatever had happened at the entrance was over, but the energy felt different, tighter, like everyone was pretending everything was normal while keeping one eye on the exits. Amara picked up another tray and went back to work. Tips were good tonight. Elena had been right about that. Rich people threw money around when they were nervous. By 10:30, she had $63 in her pocket, more than enough for the medicine that was somehow already paid for. She was clearing glasses from a table near the windows when she felt someone watching her again. Not the casual attention of a guest who wanted more champagne. The focused attention of someone who had been waiting. This time she looked. Luca Valenti stood 15 feet away near the bar. The crowd of women had moved on to easier targets, but he didn't seem to notice. His dark eyes were fixed on her with an intensity that made her skin feel warm. A man in an expensive suit approached him and whispered something in his ear. Luca nodded without looking away from her. The man handed him something, a phone maybe, and disappeared back into the crowd. Amara finished clearing the table and headed for the kitchen. Behind her she heard footsteps that matched her pace, not following exactly, just there. She pushed through the swinging doors into the service corridor. The footsteps stopped. When she came back out 5 minutes later, he was gone. The gala ended at midnight. Amara helped with cleanup until nearly 1 a.m., then finally clocked out and counted her tips. $87. Enough for the medicine and groceries, and maybe even a small payment on the electric bill. The staff parking garage was mostly empty. Her old Honda sat under a broken light, looking as tired as she felt. Amara dug for her keys and tried not to think about the mysterious payment for Aunt Lila's medicine. Someone had helped her. Someone who knew what she needed and how to provide it without making her feel like charity. Someone with enough money and power to make a pharmacy transaction happen with a phone call. Someone who had been watching her all night. She unlocked her car and got in. The engine turned over on the third try. As she backed out of her parking space, she noticed a dark sedan sitting near the garage exit. Empty as far as she could tell, probably nothing. But when she turned onto the street, the sedan's headlights came on. When she turned left toward her apartment, it turned left too. When she stopped at the red light, it stopped 3 cars behind her. Amara's hands tightened on the steering wheel. This was probably nothing. Paranoia brought on by a weird night, and too much caffeine, and the strange feeling that someone had been taking care of problems she didn't even know existed. Probably nothing. But when the light turned green and she took an extra right turn to test her theory, the sedan followed. She pulled into the parking lot of an all-night diner and sat with the engine running. The sedan drove past without slowing down. Through the tinted windows, she couldn't see who was inside. Amara waited 10 minutes, then drove home by a different route. No one followed. At her apartment building, she sat in the car for another few minutes, scanning the street. Empty, quiet, normal. She was being paranoid. Rich people's drama wasn't her business, and whatever had happened at the hotel tonight had nothing to do with her. She was a waitress who needed $50 for her aunt's medicine. Nothing more complicated than that. Except someone had already paid for the medicine. Someone who knew exactly what she needed. Someone who might be the reason she'd felt watched all night. Amara locked her car and walked to the building entrance. The lobby was bright and safe and ordinary. She took the elevator to the 4th floor and walked down the familiar hallway to apartment 4C. The door was already open. Not wide open, just cracked, like someone had closed it, but the latch hadn't caught. Light spilled out from the gap, the light she'd left on for Aunt Lila. Amara's heart hammered against her ribs. She pushed the door open slowly. Lila? No answer. Aunt Lila? The living room was empty but undisturbed. Amara moved toward the bedroom, phone in hand, ready to call 911. But then she heard it. The soft sound of snoring from the bedroom. Aunt Lila was asleep in her bed, breathing steady and peaceful. The pill organizer on the nightstand was exactly where it should be. Nothing was missing. Nothing was broken. But the front door had been open. Amara checked the locks. Both deadbolts were in place, locked from the inside, which meant either she'd forgotten to latch the door properly when she left for work, or someone had been inside and left through a different exit. The fire escape. She went to the living room window and checked the latch. Unlocked. The window was closed, but it hadn't been locked. Someone had been in her apartment. Someone who knew she wouldn't be home until after midnight. Someone who had come and gone without disturbing Aunt Lila or taking anything. Someone who had been careful not to wake an old woman with a heart condition. Someone who might have been checking to make sure she was safe, or someone who wanted her to know that locked doors and 4th-floor apartments wouldn't keep her safe if they decided she wasn't. Amara locked the window and all 3 deadbolts. She checked every room twice. Nothing was missing. Nothing was broken. But the feeling lingered. The sense that invisible hands were moving pieces around her life like a chess game she didn't know she was playing. She made tea and sat at the kitchen table with her phone in her hand. The number for 911 was ready to dial, but what would she tell them? Someone might have been in my apartment but didn't steal anything. Someone paid for my aunt's medicine and I don't know who. Outside, a car door closed softly. Amara went to the window and peered through the blinds. The street was mostly empty, but a dark sedan sat under the broken streetlight across from her building, the same sedan from the parking garage. As she watched, A tall man in a dark suit got out of the passenger side and looked up at her building. Even from 4 floors up and half a block away, she recognized him, the man who had whispered in Luca Valenti's ear at the gala. He stood there for maybe 30 seconds, looking at her window. Then he got back in the car and drove away. Amara closed the blinds and sat back down at the kitchen table. Her tea was getting cold, but she didn't notice. All she could think about was the way Luca Valenti had watched her across that ballroom, the intensity in his dark eyes, the feeling that he was cataloguing every detail about her. And now someone was keeping watch outside her building. Someone was taking care of her problems before she even knew they were problems. Someone wanted her to know she was being watched. Protected or threatened, she couldn't tell the difference. But one thing was clear, tonight had changed something. Whether she wanted it or not, she was part of something bigger than a waitress job and an old woman's medicine. Part of something that involved powerful men and dark sedans and payments that appeared out of nowhere. Part of something that scared her and intrigued her in equal measure. Amara finished her cold tea and went to check on Aunt Lila one more time, still sleeping peacefully, still safe, for now. Morning came too soon. Amara woke up on the couch, still in her work clothes, phone clutched in her hand. Sunlight streamed through the blinds she'd forgotten to open. Aunt Lila was moving around in the kitchen, humming off-key like she always did. "Morning, baby," Lila called. "You look like you slept on the couch. Couldn't get comfortable in bed." It wasn't exactly a lie. Amara sat up and rubbed her neck. "How are you feeling?" "Good. Better than yesterday. Did you pick up my medicine?" "It's paid for. I'll get it this morning." "Paid for? By who?" Amara hesitated. "I'm not sure. The pharmacy said someone took care of it." Lila appeared in the living room doorway, coffee mug in hand, eyebrows raised. At 62, she was still sharp as a knife and twice as suspicious. "Someone? What someone? We don't know anybody with that kind of money." "I know. It's weird." "Weird is right. People don't just pay for other people's medicine unless they want something." Lila studied her niece's face. "What aren't you telling me?" Amara thought about the open door, the unlocked window, the sedan in the street, the way Luca Valenti had watched her, like he was memorizing her face. Nothing. Someone was just being nice. Nobody's that nice, especially not to us. That was the truth Amara had been raised on. They were on their own. They didn't have family money or connections, or people who solved their problems. They had each other and whatever they could earn and nothing else. It had been that way since her parents died when she was 22, and it had kept them safe for 7 years. But last night, someone with power and money had decided to change that equation. "I'm going to shower," Amara said. "Then I'll pick up your pills and go to the grocery store." "Be careful," Lila called after her. When something seems too good to be true, it usually is. In the shower, Amara let the hot water wash away the aches from sleeping on the couch and the lingering fear from last night. By the time she got dressed, she had almost convinced herself that she was overreacting. Rich people did charity sometimes. Maybe Luca Valenti had heard her talking to Eleanor about needing money. Maybe he'd made a generous gesture without thinking too hard about it. Maybe the dark sedan was just a coincidence. Maybe the unlocked window was her own forgetfulness. But when she opened her front door to leave for the pharmacy, she found her staff ID card lying on the hallway floor. The ID she had lost somewhere between the loading bay and the parking garage. The ID that had her picture and her full name and the hotel address. Someone had brought it back to her. Someone who knew where she lived. Someone who wanted her to know they'd been there. Amara stared at the ID card in her hand. Her name was printed in neat black letters under a photo that made her look tired. She'd taken this picture 18 months ago, on her first day at the Grand Harbor Hotel. The card had been clipped to her apron when she left work last night. Now it was lying on her hallway floor like a calling card. Someone had been here again. "Amara?" Aunt Lila's voice came from inside the apartment. "Everything okay?" "Fine," she called back, slipping the ID into her pocket. "Just checking the mail." But her hands were shaking as she locked the door behind her. 3 deadbolts that hadn't kept anyone out. A 4th-floor apartment that was supposed to be safe. Nothing was safe anymore. The pharmacy was 6 blocks away, a familiar walk she'd made dozens of times. But today she found herself looking over her shoulder every few steps, checking reflections in store windows, counting the cars that seemed to be driving too slowly. At Brooks' pharmacy, the elderly pharmacist smiled when she gave her name. "Ah, yes, Miss Brooks. Your aunt's prescription." He disappeared into the back and returned with a white paper bag. "All taken care of. No charge. Can you tell me who paid for it?" "I'm afraid that information is private. But whoever it was, they care about your family." Amara took the bag and walked home by a different route. The medicine rattled softly as she walked, a sound that should have been comforting, but only reminded her that invisible hands were managing her life. Back at the apartment, she found Aunt Lila sitting at the kitchen table with her morning coffee and the newspaper crossword puzzle. "Get my pills." "Got them." Amara set the bag on the counter. Whoever paid for them didn't leave a name. Lila looked up from her puzzle. "That bothers you." "Yeah, it bothers me. People don't just help strangers unless they want something. Maybe they don't want anything. Maybe they just have more money than problems." "Nobody has more money than problems." Lila studied her niece's face. "You're scared." Amara sat down across from her. "A little." "Want to talk about it?" Where would she start? The man at the hotel who watched her like she was a puzzle he wanted to solve. The sedan that had followed her home? The unlocked window and the returned ID card? "I think someone's been watching me," she said finally. "Watching you how?" "I don't know. Just watching. Keeping track of where I go and what I need." Lila set down her pencil. "This have anything to do with that fancy party you worked last night?" "Maybe. I don't know. Rich people's problems have a way of becoming everyone else's problems. You be careful, baby." Amara's phone buzzed. "Elena, need to talk. Can you come in early today?" "What's wrong?" "Not on the phone. Come in as soon as you can." Amara showed the messages to Lila, who frowned. "That girl's not the type to get spooked easy," Lila said. "If she's worried, you should be worried too." The Grand Harbor Hotel looked the same in daylight, glass and marble and money, but something felt different. Security guards who usually nodded at her looked away. Staff members she'd worked with for months suddenly had urgent business elsewhere when she walked past. She found Eleanor in the events office, surrounded by clipboards and stress. "Thank God you're here," Eleanor said, closing the door behind her. "We need to talk." "What's going on?" Eleanor gestured to the chair across from her desk. "After you left last night, some men came by. They were asking questions." "What kind of questions?" "About you, specifically about the waitress who saw too much during the incident at the entrance." Amara's stomach dropped. "What incident?" "I was in the loading bay when whatever happened happened." "That's what I told them. But they seemed to think you might have seen something before security moved everyone out." "Who were they?" "Hotel security said they were police, but—" Elena shrugged. "They didn't feel like police. They felt like the kind of men who ask questions and don't take no for an answer." "What did you tell them?" "Nothing. Your address, your schedule, where you live. I told them all that information was private." "But Amara—" Eleanor leaned forward. These weren't the kind of men who care about privacy policies. The room felt smaller suddenly. Amara thought about her apartment door that had been unlocked, the window that shouldn't have been accessible from the fire escape, the ID card that had appeared like magic. Did they leave names? No, but one of them had a scar along his jaw, and the other one kept checking his phone like he was waiting for orders. Elena paused. "Have you noticed anything strange? Anyone following you or watching your building?" "Maybe. Maybe isn't good enough. If these guys are looking for you, you need to be careful." Amara's phone rang. Unknown number. "Don't answer it," Elena said quickly. But Amara was already swiping to accept. "Hello? Miss Brooks." The voice was deep, calm, with just a hint of an accent she couldn't place. "This is Nico. I work for Mr. Valenti." Elena's eyes went wide. "I don't know any Mr. Valenti," Amara said. "You met him last night at the hotel. He asked me to call you." "Why?" "There are some people looking for you, people who might want to have a conversation you wouldn't enjoy. Mr. Valenti would like to make sure that conversation never happens." "I don't need protection from strangers." "With respect, Miss Brooks, you might not have a choice. These people have been to your workplace. They've been to your building. They know where you live and where you work, and what time you get home from double shifts." Amara felt like the walls were closing in. "What do they want?" "They think you saw something last night that you shouldn't have. They think you might be a problem that needs solving." "I didn't see anything. I don't know anything." "That might not matter to them." Elena was making frantic gestures, pointing at the phone and shaking her head. But Amara couldn't hang up. This man, Nico, knew too much about her life, about her schedule and her building, and the fact that she worked double shifts to pay for her aunt's medicine. "What does Mr. Valenti want?" she asked. "To keep you safe." "Why would he care about keeping me safe?" There was a pause. "You'll have to ask him that yourself." "I don't want to ask him anything. I want to be left alone." "That might have been an option yesterday. It's not an option today." The line went dead. Elena stared at her. "Please tell me you're not thinking about trusting Luca Valenti." "I don't know what I'm thinking." "I'll tell you what you should be thinking. You should be thinking about taking a vacation, a long vacation, somewhere far away from here. I can't leave. Lila needs her medication, and I need this job, and Amara. Eleanor's voice was gentle but firm. There are some fights you can't win. Some people you can't say no to. Luca Valenti is both of those things. You're scaring me. Good. You should be scared, but you should also be smart. Eleanor pulled a business card from her desk drawer. This is my cousin Miguel. He's a cop, a real cop. If things get bad, call him. Amara took the card. What aren't you telling me? Nothing. Everything. I don't know. Eleanor ran her hands through her perfectly styled hair. Just be careful. And if someone offers you protection, maybe don't be too proud to take it. Amara's shift passed in a blur of coffee refills and forced smiles. Every shadow looked like a threat. Every guest who stared too long made her nervous. By 4 o'clock, she had barely made $20 in tips, but all she wanted was to go home and lock her door and pretend this was all a nightmare. She clocked out and walked to the staff parking garage. The broken light still flickered over her Honda. But today there was a man standing next to it. Tall, dark suit. The same man she'd seen outside her building last night. Miss Brooks. He had the calm, deep voice from the phone. I'm Nico. I don't want to talk to you. I understand. But we need to talk anyway. He gestured to her car. These are nice cars, old but reliable. This one's been well taken care of. Don't touch my car. I'm not touching anything. Just observing. He walked slowly around the Honda. Good tires. Recent oil change. You take care of what's yours. What do you want? Mr. Valenti would like to meet with you, somewhere public, somewhere safe, somewhere you can leave anytime you want. I already told you I don't want to meet him. And I told you that might not be an option. Nico stopped in front of her. The men who came to your hotel today, they're not going to stop asking questions. They're not going to stop looking for you. And when they find you, not if, when, the conversation they want to have won't be as polite as this one. Why should I trust you? You shouldn't. You should trust your instincts. And your instincts should tell you that you're in trouble you can't handle alone. Amara unlocked her car. I'm going home. That might not be safe. My aunt is there. I'm not leaving her alone. Nico nodded slowly. Mr. Valenti thought you might say that. He asked me to tell you that if you change your mind, someone will be watching your building tonight, just to make sure nobody bothers you or your aunt. I don't want your protection. It's not about what you want anymore. It's about what you need. He stepped away from her car. Drive carefully, Miss Brooks, and keep your phone close. The drive home felt like the longest 6 blocks of her life. Every red light lasted forever. Every car behind her might be following. Every shadow might be hiding someone who wanted to have a conversation she wouldn't enjoy. At her building, she sat in the car for 5 minutes, scanning the street. Normal, quiet. But now she knew that normal didn't mean safe. Inside, Aunt Lila was making dinner. Spaghetti and meatballs from a jar. The same meal they'd been eating twice a week for months, because it was cheap and filling. You look terrible, Lila said when she walked in. Thanks. I feel terrible. Want to talk about it? Amara set her purse on the counter and thought about how to explain that their quiet life had somehow become complicated, that powerful people were paying attention to them, that men in dark suits knew where they lived and what they needed, and how much her aunt's medicine cost. Someone wants to help us, she said finally. Help us what? Stay safe. Lila turned from the stove. Safe from what? I don't know. Maybe nothing. Maybe everything. They ate dinner in silence. Afterward, Lila went to bed early, and Amara sat at the kitchen table with her phone and Miguel's business card. A real cop, Elena had said. Someone who could help if things got bad. But how bad was bad? And how could she explain that she was afraid of shadows and strangers and the feeling that invisible hands were rearranging her life? At 10 o'clock, she checked the locks one more time and turned off the lights. From her bedroom window, she could see the street below, empty except for a dark sedan parked under the broken streetlight, the same sedan from last night. She watched for 20 minutes. Nobody got out. Nobody got in. Just a car sitting in the shadows, keeping watch. Keeping her safe or keeping her trapped. She couldn't tell the difference. Morning came with pounding on her door. Amara jolted awake and checked the clock. 7:15 a.m. She wasn't scheduled to work until noon. The pounding came again, urgent, insistent. Amara, Aunt Lila's voice from the living room, sharp with fear. Someone's at the door. Amara grabbed her robe and ran to the living room. Through the peephole, she could see 2 men in cheap suits. Not the same men from the hotel, but the same type. The type who asked questions and didn't take no for an answer. Police, one of them called through the door. We need to ask you some questions. About what? About last night at the Grand Harbor Hotel. I wasn't at the hotel last night. I worked a day shift and came home. We have witnesses who say different. Amara's heart hammered. I want to see badges. Open the door and you'll see badges. Behind her, Aunt Lila whispered, Don't open it, something's not right. The men outside were talking to each other now, voices too low to understand. Then one of them called out, Miss Brooks, we can do this easy or we can do this hard. But we're going to talk to you either way. Amara grabbed her phone and dialed 911. 911, what's your emergency? There are men at my door claiming to be police, but I don't think they are. What's your address? She gave it, whispering so the men outside couldn't hear. Officers are en route. Stay on the line and don't open the door. But the pounding had stopped. Amara looked through the peephole again. The hallway was empty. They're gone, she told the dispatcher. Officers are still coming to check the area. Stay inside until they arrive. 20 minutes later, real police knocked on her door. Real badges, real uniforms, real concern when she explained about the fake cops who had demanded to talk to her. We'll increase patrols in the area, the officer said, but if someone's impersonating police, this is serious. You should consider staying somewhere else for a few days. After the real cops left, Amara sat with Aunt Lila at the kitchen table, both of them still in their robes, both of them shaken. This is about that hotel job, Lila said. You need to quit. I can't quit. We need the money. We need you alive more than we need money. Amara's phone rang. Nico again. This time she answered immediately. Were you watching? She asked without saying hello. Yes. Did you see them? We saw them. They won't be back. How do you know? Because they know that we're watching now, because they know that bothering you means bothering us. I want to meet him, she said suddenly. Mr. Valenti, I want to meet him today. That can be arranged. Somewhere public, somewhere safe. Of course. There's a coffee shop on Harbor Street, Cafe Luna. Do you know it? I know it. 2 o'clock. I'll be there. She hung up and looked at Aunt Lila. You're going to meet him, Lila said. It wasn't a question. I have to. This isn't going away, and I can't keep putting you in danger. What if it's a trap? Then at least I'll know for sure. Lila reached across the table and took her hand. Your parents made me promise to take care of you, but you're 29 years old, and you've been taking care of yourself for years. If you think this is the right choice, then I trust you. What if I'm wrong? Then we'll figure it out. We always do. Cafe Luna sat on a corner where Harbor Street met the waterfront. Small tables inside, bigger tables on the sidewalk, the kind of place where people lingered over expensive coffee and watched boats come and go. Public, safe, normal. Amara arrived 5 minutes early and chose a table by the window where she could see the street in both directions. She ordered black coffee she couldn't afford and tried to look like someone having a normal afternoon instead of someone about to meet a man who might solve all her problems or create new ones. At exactly 2 o'clock, a black sedan pulled up outside. Not the same sedan that had been watching her building, but close enough to make her nervous. A man got out from the driver's side, Nico, she realized, and opened the rear door. Luca Valenti stepped out. In daylight, without the formal atmosphere of the hotel gala, he looked younger, still dangerous but more human somehow. He wore dark jeans and a grey sweater instead of a $1,000 suit, but his eyes were the same, dark and focused and intense enough to make her feel like he was memorizing her face. He said something to Nico, who nodded and got back in the car. Then he walked into the cafe alone. Miss Brooks. He approached her table slowly, hands visible, movements careful. Thank you for meeting me. I haven't decided to trust you yet. Good. You shouldn't trust anyone too quickly. He gestured to the empty chair across from her. May I? She nodded. He sat down and studied her face. You look tired. Fake cops pounding on my door at 7 in the morning tends to ruin my sleep. That won't happen again. How can you be sure? Because those men work for someone who now understands that you're under my protection. I didn't ask for your protection. No, you didn't. He signaled the waitress and ordered espresso. But you need it anyway. Why do you care what happens to me? He was quiet for a long moment, considering his answer. Do you know what I do for a living, Miss Brooks? I have an idea. People ask me to solve problems. Sometimes those problems involve business. Sometimes they involve money. And sometimes they involve people who have seen or heard things they shouldn't have. I didn't see anything. I believe you, but the men who were at your door this morning don't care what you saw. They care what you might have seen, what you might remember, what you might say if someone asks the right questions. The waitress brought his espresso. He wrapped his hands around the small cup like he was trying to warm them. "There was an incident at the hotel 2 nights ago," he continued. "A disagreement between 2 groups of people who prefer to handle disagreements privately. You happened to be working that night. You happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. And now someone thinks I'm a witness to something. Yes, but you don't think I am. I know you're not. Because I know exactly where you were and what you were doing every moment of that evening." That should have scared her, but instead it felt oddly comforting. Someone had been keeping track of her safety. "Why were you watching me?" He smiled, and it transformed his entire face. "That's a different question entirely. I want an answer to this one first. Because you interested me. Because you walked past me like I wasn't there. Because you were the only woman in that room who didn't want anything from me." His smile faded. "And because I've learned to pay attention when something unusual happens in my presence. I'm not unusual. I'm just busy. You're the most unusual woman I've met in years." A warmth spread through her chest that had nothing to do with the coffee. "That's not an answer. It's the only answer I have right now." They sat in silence for a minute. Outside, normal people walked past living normal lives. Inside, she was having coffee with a man who could solve her problems with a phone call or make them infinitely worse with the same phone call. "What happens now?" she asked. "That depends on what you want. I want to go back to my life. I want to work and take care of my aunt and not worry about men in dark suits watching my building." "That might not be possible." "Why not?" "Because the people looking for you won't stop looking just because you want them to, because this kind of attention doesn't go away on its own." "So, what are my options?" Luca leaned forward. "You can let me help you. You can trust that I have resources these other people don't have. You can accept that sometimes the only way to be safe is to be protected by someone stronger than the people who want to hurt you. And what do you get out of it? The knowledge that you're safe. That's not enough. Nobody helps strangers for nothing." He was quiet again, staring into his espresso cup like it held answers. "You're right," he said finally. "I do want something." "What?" "Time. A chance to know you without threats and fear, and men in dark suits. A chance to find out if the woman who walked past me without looking is someone I could care about. And if I say no, then I make sure you're safe anyway, but from a distance, without the chance to know you." Amara thought about her aunt's medicine that had been paid for by invisible hands, her apartment that had been protected by invisible watchers, her life that had somehow become entangled with a man she'd met for 5 minutes at a hotel gala. "If I say yes, what does that mean?" "It means you let me help you with immediate problems. It means you and your aunt come somewhere safe until this threat is resolved. It means you give us both time to figure out what this could become." "For how long?" 72 hours, 3 days. If you're not comfortable after that, I'll arrange protection from a distance and you'll never have to see me again." She thought about Aunt Lila alone in the apartment, about fake cops who might come back, about the feeling of being watched by people who didn't have her best interests at heart. 3 days? 3 days. And my aunt comes too. Your aunt comes too. Her medication, her routines, whatever she needs to be comfortable. Where? Somewhere safe, somewhere private, somewhere you can leave anytime you want. Amara finished her coffee and made a decision that would change everything. "Okay," she said. 3 days. The safe house wasn't what Amara had expected. She'd imagined something like a fortress, high walls, security cameras, the kind of place that screamed danger. Instead, Luca's black sedan pulled up to a quiet townhouse on a tree-lined street near the harbor. 3 stories of warm brick and white shutters, with flower boxes under the windows, and a blue door that looked freshly painted. "This is it?" she asked from the back seat, where she sat next to Aunt Lila. "This is it," Luca said from the front passenger seat. Nico was driving, his eyes constantly scanning the street, even though they'd taken a route that doubled back on itself 3 times. "It looks normal. That's the point. The safest hiding places are the ones that don't look like hiding places." Nico parked in the driveway, and they all got out. Amara helped Aunt Lila with her overnight bag, while Luca carried the larger suitcase they'd packed in 20 minutes of controlled panic. Lila had insisted on bringing her own pillow, and the photo of Amara's parents that sat on her nightstand. Amara had grabbed clothes and toiletries, and the book she'd been trying to read for 6 months. 3 days. She could do anything for 3 days. The front door opened before they reached it. A woman in her 50s appeared wearing jeans and a sweater that had flour on the sleeves. "This is Rosa," Luca said. "She takes care of the house." Rosa smiled warmly at Aunt Lila. "You must be Mrs. Brooks. I have tea ready, and there's soup on the stove if you're hungry." "That's very kind," Lila said. "But please, call me Lila. Of course, Lila. And you're Amara, Mr. Luca told me you might be staying for a few days. Mr. Luca. Like he was someone's nephew instead of someone people were afraid to cross. Amara glanced at him, but he was already heading inside with their luggage. The inside of the house continued the illusion of normalcy. Hardwood floors, comfortable furniture, windows that let in plenty of light, a kitchen that smelled like garlic and herbs, bookshelves lined with actual books instead of just for show. The guest room is on the second floor, Rosa said, leading them upstairs. Nice and quiet with its own bathroom. I put extra blankets in the closet in case it gets cold. The guest room had 2 twin beds with white comforters and a window that looked out over a small garden. Nothing fancy, but clean and peaceful. This is lovely, Lila said, sitting on one of the beds to test the mattress. Much nicer than I expected. What did you expect? Amara asked. I don't know. Something more criminal, Rosa laughed. Mr. Luca likes his homes to feel like homes. He says there's enough ugliness in the world without bringing it inside. After Rosa left them to settle in, Amara stood at the window watching the garden. Tomato plants in neat rows, herbs growing in wooden boxes. A small shed painted the same blue as the front door. You can stop looking for the escape route, Luca said from the doorway. She turned around. He'd changed into jeans and a blue button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled up. More normal clothes that made him look more normal, except for his eyes. Those were still too sharp, too aware. I wasn't. Yes, you were. Back door through the kitchen, side gate through the garden, or front door if you're not worried about being subtle. He stepped into the room. But you should know that leaving without telling me puts you and your aunt in more danger, not less. Are we prisoners here? You're guests, but guests who need to be careful. Aunt Lila looked up from unpacking her medications. How careful? Careful enough that I'd prefer you not go anywhere alone. Careful enough that the windows stay locked and the curtains stay closed after dark. Careful enough that if anyone comes to the door who isn't supposed to be here, you go to the basement and wait for me or Nico. How long has it been since you lost someone you were trying to protect? Lila asked suddenly. The question hit like a physical blow. Luca's face went completely still. I'm sorry, Lila said quickly. I shouldn't have. 2 years, he said quietly. 2 years and 3 months. What happened? They were supposed to be safe. I thought they were safe. I was wrong. Amara felt something twist in her chest. Who were they? My wife and daughter. The silence stretched until Aunt Lila got up and walked over to him. She was a small woman, barely reaching his chest, but she put her hand on his arm like she was comforting a hurt child. I'm sorry for your loss, she said. And I'm sorry I asked, but I needed to know if you understand what you're protecting. I understand. Do you? Because that girl over there is all I have left in the world. If something happens to her because we trusted the wrong person, nothing will happen to her. You can't promise that. I can promise that I'll die before I let anyone hurt her. The words hung in the air between them, too intense, too much, too honest. Lila studied his face for a long moment, then nodded. Okay then, but I want to see the basement. And I want to know where you keep the first aid kit. And I want your word that if this gets too dangerous, you'll get us out, even if we don't want to go. You have my word. Good. Lila turned back to her unpacking. Now Rosa mentioned soup. I haven't had a decent meal in months. Dinner was surprisingly normal. Rosa had made minestrone soup and fresh bread, and they sat around the kitchen table like a family, instead of strangers thrown together by circumstances. Lila told stories about Amara as a teenager, embarrassing ones that made Amara want to hide under the table, but also made Luca smile. She was so determined to be independent, Lila said, buttering another piece of bread. 15 years old and insisting she could take care of herself. Got a job at a pizza place and tried to pay me rent. I wanted to contribute, Amara protested. You wanted to prove you didn't need anyone. Same thing you're doing now. Luca looked at her across the table. Is that what you're doing? Maybe. Old habits. When did it start? The need to take care of yourself? Amara hesitated. This felt too personal, too much like sharing secrets with someone she'd known for 3 days. But Aunt Lila was looking at her with soft eyes, and Luca was waiting for an answer like it mattered. When my parents died, she said finally. Car accident when I was 22. Lila was living in Florida, and I was in my last year of college. She moved up here to help me finish school, but I knew she was giving up her whole life, so I decided I needed to be strong enough that she wouldn't have to worry about me. And you've been strong enough ever since, Luca said. I've tried to be. What happens when being strong isn't enough? The question scared her because she'd been asking herself the same thing for 2 days. What happened when fake cops came to your door and men in dark suits knew where you lived and worked? What happened when being careful and independent and strong couldn't protect the people you loved? I guess you asked for help, she said quietly. That must have been hard for you. Terrifying. He smiled, and it was different from his other smiles. Warmer, more real. You're terrifying too, you know. How am I terrifying? Because you make me want things I thought I couldn't have anymore. The words hung between them like a bridge. Neither of them was ready to cross. Aunt Lila cleared her throat. I think I'll go upstairs and read for a while, she said, standing up. Leave you two to figure out whatever this is. After she left, Amara and Luca sat in silence, the weight of his confessions settling over them. What kind of things? She asked finally. Normal things. Dinner conversations that last past dark. Someone to worry about who isn't in danger because of me. Someone who looks at me like I'm a man instead of a threat. I don't know what you are yet. Fair enough. What would you need to know? She thought about it. I'd need to know that you're not going to try to control my life. I'd need to know that protecting me doesn't mean owning me. I'd need to know that when this is over, I can still choose what happens next. And if I can promise those things, then maybe we could see what normal feels like. The first night was the hardest. Amara lay in the twin bed, listening to Aunt Lila's soft snoring and trying not to think about the man sleeping somewhere in the same house. A man who said he wanted normal things, but lived a life that was anything but normal. A man who had lost his family and blamed himself. A man who looked at her like she was the answer to a question he'd been afraid to ask. She must have fallen asleep eventually, because she woke up to the smell of coffee and the sound of voices downstairs. The clock on the nightstand said 7:30 a.m. In the kitchen, she found Luca standing at the stove scrambling eggs, while Aunt Lila sat at the table sorting her morning medications into neat rows. Morning, Luca said without turning around. How do you like your eggs? You don't have to cook for us. I know, how do you like your eggs? Scrambled is fine. He added another spoonful of eggs to the pan. Coffee's fresh. Rosa left early to go to the market. Amara poured coffee and sat down next to Aunt Lila. How did you sleep? Better than I have in months. This place is peaceful. Lila gestured toward the stove. And your young man makes excellent coffee. He's not my young man. Not yet, maybe. Luca brought plates to the table, and they ate breakfast in comfortable silence. Outside, birds chirped in the garden. Inside, sunlight streamed through clean windows. It felt almost normal, except for the cell phone that sat next to Luca's plate and buzzed every few minutes with messages he checked but didn't answer. Business? Amara asked after the fifth buzz. Always business, but nothing urgent. What kind of business? He looked at her over his coffee cup. How much do you want to know? I don't know. What are my options? I can tell you everything and you'll understand exactly what kind of man you're sitting across from, or I can tell you nothing and you can keep pretending I'm someone normal who just happens to be good at handling problems. What do you want to tell me? Nothing. I want to keep sitting here drinking coffee with you and pretending that the last 2 years never happened. But that's not realistic. No, it's not. His phone buzzed again. This time he answered it. What is it, Nico? When? How many, No, handle it quietly. No police, no mess. Just make sure they understand that asking questions about Miss Brooks is bad for their health. He hung up and looked at them both. The men who came to your apartment yesterday tried to get information from your neighbors. Nico convinced them to stop. Convinced them how? Amara asked. Does it matter? It matters to me. He explained the situation, clearly and persuasively. That's not an answer. Luca was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. I run businesses. Some of them are completely legal. Some of them exist in grey areas. All of them require dealing with people who don't always respond to polite requests. Are you in the Mafia? The question hung in the air like smoke. Luca set down his coffee cup and met her eyes. That's a complicated question. It's a yes or no question. Is it? If I say yes, does that change how you feel about the fact that you're safer here than you've been since this started? Does it change the fact that men who wanted to hurt you are now afraid to ask your neighbors questions? Maybe. And if I say no, does that make the protection less real? Does it make the danger you're in less serious? Amara thought about the fake cops at her door, the men at her hotel asking questions about her, the feeling of being hunted by people who had more power and resources than she did. I need you to be honest with me, she said finally. I try to be honest about the things that matter. This matters. Yes, in some people's definition of the word, I'm in the Mafia. In my definition, I'm a businessman who sometimes has to use unconventional methods to protect what's important to me. And right now I'm important to you? Right now you're the most important thing in my world. The words should have scared her. Instead, they made her feel safer than she had in days. Aunt Lila cleared her throat. Well, that's settled then. Now, what are the rules for this house? Because if we're staying here for 3 days, I'd like to know what I can and can't do. The rules, as it turned out, were simpler than expected. Stay inside during daylight hours unless Luca or Nico was with them. Don't answer the door for anyone. Keep cell phones on and nearby at all times. If anything felt wrong, go to the basement and wait. What's in the basement? Amara asked. Supplies, communications equipment. A way out if the main exits are blocked. You've planned for everything. I've learned to plan for everything. The day settled into an easy rhythm. Luca disappeared into what Rosa called his office, a room on the first floor with the door always closed. Aunt Lila claimed the living room and her book. Amara found herself restless, pacing from room to room like a caged animal. At noon, Luca emerged from his office and found her standing at the kitchen window, staring at the garden. Want to help me with lunch? He asked. You cook? Rosa taught me. She said a man who can't feed himself is useless. They worked together, making sandwiches and salad, moving around each other in the small kitchen like they'd been doing it for years instead of hours. His shoulder brushed hers when he reached for the bread. Her hand touched his when they both grabbed for the same knife. Small contacts that felt bigger than they should. Can I ask you something? She said while he sliced tomatoes. When you watched me at the hotel that night, what were you thinking? He stopped slicing and considered the question. I was thinking that you were the only person in that room who wasn't performing. Everyone else was playing a role. The charming socialite, the powerful businessman, the beautiful woman. But you were just working, just being yourself. That's it? That's everything. Do you know how rare it is to meet someone who's just themselves? In your world, maybe. In any world, he resumed slicing. I've spent the last 2 years surrounded by people who want something from me. Money, protection, favors, connections. You walked past me like I was invisible. You're not invisible. To you I was that night. And now? He set down the knife and looked at her. Now you see me. The question is whether you like what you're seeing. Before she could answer, Aunt Lila appeared in the doorway. Am I interrupting something? She asked, with the tone of someone who knew she was interrupting something and found it amusing. We were just making lunch, Amara said quickly. Uh-huh. Well, while you were just making lunch, I was thinking about dinner. How about I cook tonight? It's been ages since I had a kitchen big enough to really work in. You don't have to... Luca started. I want to. Besides, you two need something to do with your hands besides staring at each other. That evening, Aunt Lila took over the kitchen like a general commanding troops. She sent Luca to the store with Rosa for ingredients and put Amara to work chopping vegetables. By 6 o'clock, the house smelled like home, garlic and herbs and something baking in the oven that made everyone's mouth water. What are you making? Amara asked, stirring a pot of something that looked like heaven. Your grandmother's recipe for chicken and dumplings, the one your mother could never get right. Lila smiled at the memory. She was good at a lot of things, but cooking wasn't one of them. I miss her. I know, baby. I miss her too. Luca came back from the store carrying bags that Rosa immediately started unpacking. He'd bought everything on Lila's list, plus flowers for the table and ice cream for dessert. You didn't have to get flowers, Amara said. Rosa said dinner parties need flowers. This isn't a dinner party. What is it then? She looked around the kitchen, Aunt Lila humming over the stove, Rosa arranging flowers in a vase, Luca setting the table like he'd done it 1,000 times. It felt like family, like home, like something she'd been missing without knowing it. I don't know, she said, but I like it. Dinner was perfect. The chicken fell off the bone, the dumplings melted in their mouths, and everyone ate too much. Rosa told stories about growing up in Italy. Lila shared recipes and memories. Luca mostly listened, but when he talked, it was about books and travel and things that had nothing to do with business or danger or men in dark suits. After Rosa went home and Lila went upstairs to read, Amara and Luca cleaned up together. They worked in comfortable silence, him washing dishes while she dried. The kitchen windows were dark now, curtains drawn against whatever might be watching from outside. This was nice, she said, putting away the last plate. Yeah, it was. Is this what normal feels like for you? I don't remember what normal feels like, but this feels right. She turned to face him, and suddenly they were standing very close in the small kitchen, close enough that she could smell his aftershave, close enough to count the flecks of gold in his dark eyes, close enough to make a choice that would change everything. Amara, he said softly, I know. If we do this, there's no going back. You'll be part of my world whether you want to be or not. And if we don't? Then you go back to your life in 3 days, and I spend the rest of mine wondering what might have been. She reached up and touched his face, fingers tracing the line of his jaw. He leaned into her touch, like a man dying of thirst who just found water. I'm scared, she whispered. So am I. What are you scared of? Losing you, failing you, being the reason something terrible happens to someone I care about. You're not going to lose me. You don't know that. Then don't let it happen. He kissed her then, soft and careful and sweet. A kiss that tasted like promises and possibilities, and the kind of hope she'd thought she'd lost when her parents died. When they broke apart, they were both breathing hard. Still scared? He asked. Terrified. You? Same. He smiled and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. Want to be terrified together? For the next 2 days? For as long as you'll have me. And standing there in that kitchen that smelled like home, with a man who made her feel safe and dangerous at the same time, Amara made another choice that would change everything. Okay, she said. Let's see what happens. The second night was easier. Amara lay in her twin bed listening to Aunt Lila's breathing and thinking about the kiss in the kitchen, about the way Luca had looked at her like she was something precious, about the way her heart had hammered when he touched her face. She was falling for him, fast and hard and completely against her better judgment, a man who lived in a world of danger and secrets, a man who could solve her problems with a phone call, but might also create problems she couldn't imagine. But when she thought about going back to her old life, the double shifts and the worry and the constant struggle to keep their heads above water, it felt like putting on clothes that no longer fit. Tomorrow was their last day. Tomorrow she'd have to decide what came next. Tomorrow felt both too far away and too close. In the morning she woke to the sound of voices downstairs. Not the comfortable breakfast conversation they'd shared yesterday. Sharper voices, urgent voices. She got dressed quickly and went downstairs to find Luca in the kitchen, with his phone pressed to his ear and a look on his face she hadn't seen before. Cold, dangerous. Nothing like the man who'd kissed her last night. How long ago, he was saying. Who saw them? No, don't move until I get there. Just watch and report. He hung up and noticed her standing in the doorway. What's wrong? She asked. The men who've been looking for you made another move. They went to your apartment building again. This time they tried to get into your apartment. Did they succeed? No. But they're getting bolder, more desperate. Aunt Lila appeared behind her, already dressed and alert despite the early hour. What does that mean for us? It means we need to accelerate our timeline, Luca said. It means the threat is escalating faster than I hoped. You said we had 3 days, Amara said. I thought we did. I was wrong. So what happens now? Luca's phone buzzed again. He glanced at it and his expression grew even grimmer. Now we find out exactly how far these people are willing to go to get to you. The phone call that changed everything came at 8 in the morning. Luca answered on the first ring, his voice sharp with tension. What is it? Amara watched his face change as he listened. The warmth from last night's kiss disappeared, replaced by something cold and calculating. This was the other side of him, the side that made grown men afraid. When? How many? Are you sure? No, don't engage. Fall back and wait for my signal. He hung up and looked at her and Aunt Lila with eyes that had gone completely flat. They found us, he said simply. Amara's stomach dropped. What do you mean they found us? 3 cars spotted on the next street over, 2 men watching the house from different angles. Someone leaked our location. What do? We leave. Now. Rosa is already packing your things. As if summoned by her name, Rosa appeared in the kitchen, carrying their hastily packed bags. Her face was pale but calm, like this wasn't the first time she'd helped people disappear quickly. Cars are ready, she said to Luca. Back exit is clear for now. Where are we going? Aunt Lila asked, surprisingly steady for a woman whose morning had just turned into an action movie. Somewhere safer, Luca said, somewhere they won't think to look. But before he could explain further, his phone rang again. This time, instead of answering, he looked at the screen and frowned. What's wrong? Amara asked. It's them. They're calling me directly. Don't answer it. If I don't answer, they'll assume the worst. Sometimes talking prevents shooting. He swiped to accept the call and put it on speaker. Yes? Mr. Valenti. The voice was smooth, cultured, with just a hint of an accent. I believe you have something that belongs to me. I don't have anything that belongs to you, Dario. Dario. Amara filed the name away, though she wasn't sure why it mattered. You have a young woman, dark skin, Works at the Grand Harbor Hotel. She saw something she shouldn't have seen. She didn't see anything. She was moved to the loading bay before anything happened. Perhaps, but I can't take that risk, I'm sure you understand. Luca's knuckles went white around the phone. What do you want? A conversation. Just her and me. 5 minutes to confirm that she knows nothing, and then we all go about our lives. No, I'm not asking, Luca, I'm telling you. One way or another, I'm going to talk to her. The only question is whether that conversation happens peacefully or otherwise. If you touch her, then don't make me touch her. Bring her to the Harbor Chapel, 1 hour. She talks to me. I confirm she's not a problem. Everyone walks away happy. And if I say no, then I stop being polite about this. The line went dead. Luca stared at the phone for a long moment, then set it down carefully on the counter. When he looked up, his face was a mask Amara had never seen before. Dangerous. Final. No, he said quietly. Absolutely not. What if he's telling the truth? Amara asked. What if 5 minutes of conversation ends this whole thing? Men like Dario don't have conversations. They have interrogations. And they don't let witnesses walk away, no matter what they promise. But no. The word came out like a gunshot. I won't let him touch you. Aunt Lila stepped forward. What if there's another way? They both looked at her. What if you give him what he wants? But on your terms, she continued. What if the conversation happens, but in a place where you control everything? What are you thinking? Luca asked. I'm thinking that men like this, bullies really, they get frustrated when they don't get their way. Frustrated people make mistakes. And you strike me as the kind of man who knows how to take advantage of mistakes. Luca was quiet for a long moment, considering. It's too dangerous, he said finally. Everything about this is dangerous, Amara said. But hiding forever isn't a solution. If we don't deal with this now, when does it end? When I eliminate the threat. And then what? More threats, more hiding, more people who think I'm a problem that needs solving. She was right, and they all knew it. Running might keep her alive, but it wouldn't give her a life. If we do this, Luca said slowly, it happens on my terms. My location, my security, my rules. What location? The Harbor Chapel, like he suggested. But not the way he suggested. An hour later, Amara stood on the steps of the Harbor Chapel with her heart hammering against her ribs. The chapel was small and old, tucked between newer buildings like a piece of history that had forgotten to leave. Luca had chosen it because it only had 2 entrances, and Nico knew every inch of the surrounding area. Remember, Luca said quietly, standing beside her. 5 minutes. Answer his questions, but don't volunteer anything. If something feels wrong, get behind me and stay there. What if he doesn't come alone? He won't come alone, but neither did we. That was true. Nico was positioned across the street. 2 more men Amara didn't recognize were watching from different angles, and Luca himself was armed. She could see the slight bulge under his jacket where he kept his gun. At exactly 10 o'clock, a black sedan pulled up to the curb. 3 men got out. The one in the middle was tall and elegant, with silver hair and expensive clothes. He moved like a man who was used to being obeyed. Dario Leone. He approached the chapel steps with his hands visible, a gesture of peace that somehow felt more threatening than if he'd been carrying a weapon. Mr. Valenti, he said pleasantly, thank you for being reasonable. Let's get this over with, Luca replied. Dario's eyes shifted to Amara. Miss Brooks, you're younger than I expected. What do you want to know? She asked, surprised by how steady her voice sounded. Tell me about the night of the hotel gala. Tell me what you saw during the incident in the main ballroom. I didn't see anything. I was moved to the loading bay before whatever happened happened. By whom? Hotel security. And you stayed there the entire time? Until they told us it was safe to go back inside. Dario studied her face like he was looking for lies. You didn't see anyone get hurt? Anyone who might not have made it to the hospital? I didn't see anything. And you haven't spoken to anyone about that night? Police? FBI? Journalists? No, there's nothing to talk about. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then Dario smiled, and it was worse than if he'd frowned. I believe you, he said. Unfortunately, that doesn't solve my problem. What problem? Luca asked, but his hand was already moving toward his jacket. The problem is that believing her and trusting her are different things. The problem is that she's seen my face now, and she knows my name, and she's standing next to a man who would use that information to destroy me if he could. That wasn't our deal. Our deal was predicated on her being innocent. But innocence and ignorance aren't the same thing, are they, Miss Brooks? Amara felt the world tilt around her. You lied. I negotiated. There's a difference. Dario gestured to his men and they started moving. Not fast, but purposeful, like they'd done this before. But Luca was faster. The gun appeared in his hand like magic, not pointed at Dario, but visible. A promise. "This ends now," he said quietly. "Yes," Dario agreed. "It does." What happened next took less than 30 seconds, but it felt like forever. One of Dario's men reached for his own weapon. Nico appeared from nowhere and tackled him to the ground. The other man ran toward the chapel steps, but Luca stepped forward and hit him with something that looked like a small club. Dario himself just stood there, watching his plan fall apart with the calm expression of someone used to disappointment. "Interesting," he said to Luca. "You're faster than I expected, and you're more foolish than I hoped, perhaps. But this isn't over." "Yes, it is." Luca's voice carried a finality that made Amara's skin crawl. Not because it scared her, but because she realized she trusted it completely. "Walk away," Luca continued. "Leave the city. Don't come back. Don't send anyone else. Don't think about Miss Brooks or me or anyone connected to us. And if I refuse, then you won't be walking away." Dario looked around at his men, one unconscious on the ground, the other being held by Nico with his arm twisted behind his back. He looked at Luca, who stood between him and Amara like an immovable wall, and then he smiled. "Very well, but you should know that eliminating me doesn't eliminate the problem. There will always be another problem, another threat, another reason to hide. Let me worry about that. Will you? Or will you let her worry about it? Because that's what this kind of life does, Luca. It turns the people we love into targets." The words hit their mark. Amara saw Luca flinch, saw the shadow cross his face. "Go," Luca said, but his voice was quieter now. Dario gestured to his remaining conscious man, who helped carry the unconscious one back to their car. Within minutes, they were gone, leaving only the smell of exhaust and the echo of threats. "Is it over?" Amara asked. Luca holstered his gun and turned to face her. "This part is." "What does that mean?" "It means Dario won't bother you again, but it also means he was right about something." "What?" "This kind of life, my kind of life, it doesn't stop producing threats." The words hung between them like a wall. They rode back to the safe house in silence. Aunt Lila was waiting in the living room, and one look at their faces told her everything she needed to know. "It's over?" she asked. "It's over," Luca confirmed. "And now what?" That was the question nobody wanted to answer. Amara sat on the couch next to her aunt and tried to process what had just happened. She was safe. The immediate threat was gone. She could go back to her life, her job, her apartment with the broken locks and the unpaid bills. She could go back to being invisible. But sitting there in that house that had felt like home for 2 days, the thought of going back felt wrong. Not just difficult, wrong. Like putting on clothes that belonged to someone else. "I need some air," she said, standing up. "Amara," Luca started. "I'll stay in the garden, behind the house. I just need to think." He nodded, and she walked through the kitchen to the back door. The garden was peaceful in the afternoon sunlight, tomatoes ripening on their vines, herbs growing wild and sweet, a small piece of normal in a world that had suddenly become very complicated. She was still standing there when Luca found her 20 minutes later. "What are you thinking?" he asked, joining her on the small bench Rosa had placed between the tomato rows. "I'm thinking that this morning I was falling in love with you, and now I don't know if that was real or just Stockholm Syndrome. What do you think?" "I think it was real. I think it's still real, and I think that scares me more than men with guns." "Why?" "Because loving you means accepting that my life will never be simple again. It means always looking over my shoulder. It means never being sure if someone wants to hurt me to get to you." "Yes," he said quietly. "It means all of those things. And you're okay with that?" "I'm not okay with any of it. But I'm less okay with the idea of losing you." She turned to look at him. "What if I asked you to give it up, the business, the danger, all of it?" "I'd try. But I don't know if it would matter. The kind of life I've lived doesn't just let you walk away. And even if it did, I don't know if I'd be any good at being normal. You're good at cooking breakfast and setting tables and making my aunt laugh. You're good at making me feel safe and wanted and important. That seems pretty normal to me. That's not the same as being normal. Maybe normal is overrated." He smiled, and it was the first real smile she'd seen from him since the phone call that morning. "Are you saying you want to try this? Knowing what it means?" "I'm saying I want to try it because of what it means. Because I've spent 7 years taking care of everyone but myself, and for the first time, someone wants to take care of me too. Even if taking care of you sometimes means dangerous things." Even then, but I have conditions. What conditions? I keep my job. Maybe not at the hotel, but somewhere. I need to work. I need to contribute. Okay. And Aunt Lila comes with us. Wherever we go, whatever we do, she's part of it. Of course. And I need honesty. Complete honesty. No more protecting me from information I need to have. That's harder. But okay. And one more thing. What? She reached over and took his hand. I need you to promise me that you'll try to be happy. Not just safe, not just careful, but actually happy. Because I think you've forgotten how. He lifted their joined hands and kissed her knuckles. I think I'm remembering. Good. Because I plan to spend a lot of time reminding you. That evening, they had dinner together one more time in the safe house kitchen. Rosa had made pasta with fresh herbs from the garden, and Aunt Lila told stories about Amara's childhood that made everyone laugh. It felt like a celebration, even though, or maybe because, they were celebrating something uncertain. After dinner, Luca pulled Amara aside. I have something for you, he said, leading her to his office. The room was smaller than she'd expected, with a desk covered in papers and a bookshelf lined with volumes in several languages. But what caught her attention was the small wooden box sitting on the desk. What is it? Something that belonged to my wife, something I thought I'd never be able to give to anyone again. He opened the box to reveal a ring. Not a diamond, that would have been too much, too presumptuous, but a simple band of white gold with small emeralds that caught the light like captured stars. It's beautiful, she breathed. She would have liked you. She would have liked the way you take care of people, the way you're not afraid to say what you think. How do you know? Because she was the same way, strong and stubborn and completely unwilling to back down from anything she believed in. He took the ring from the box and held it out to her. I'm not asking you to marry me. Not yet. I'm asking you to consider the possibility that someday you might want to. What if that someday never comes? Then you keep the ring anyway, and I keep hoping. She took the ring and slipped it onto her right hand. Not her left, not yet, but somewhere that felt like a promise. What happens now? She asked. Now we figure out what our life looks like. We find you a job you love and a place to live where Aunt Lila can have her garden and you can have your independence. And you? I try to build a life that's worth sharing with you, even if it's complicated, especially if it's complicated. Simple was never an option for me, but happy might be. She kissed him then, soft and sure, in the quiet office with the ring warm on her finger and the promise of an uncertain future stretching out ahead of them. When they broke apart, she was smiling. I love you, she said. I'm terrified and confused and probably making a huge mistake, but I love you. I love you too. And for what it's worth, I think this is the best mistake either of us has ever made. 6 months later, the harbour chapel looked different in the afternoon sunlight. Peaceful instead of threatening, beautiful instead of dangerous. Amara stood at the same spot where she'd faced down Dario Leone, but today she was wearing a white dress and carrying flowers from Rosa's garden. You ready? Aunt Lila asked, adjusting Amara's veil one more time. As ready as I'll ever be. He's a good man. Different than I expected, but good. How is he different? I thought he'd try to change you, make you smaller so you'd fit into his world better. Instead, he's made his world bigger so there's room for all of you. That was true. The apartment they'd moved into had space for Aunt Lila's medications and routines. The restaurant where Amara now worked as a manager respected her schedule and her need to check on family. The life they'd built together wasn't simple, but it was theirs. You think Mama and Daddy would approve? Amara asked. I think they'd be happy that you found someone who loves you enough to let you be yourself. The chapel doors opened, and Elena appeared with a smile that could have powered the entire waterfront. Time to go, she said. Your man's getting impatient. Amara walked down the aisle of the small chapel toward a man who had kept every promise he'd made to her, who had found ways to be protective without being controlling, who had learned to be happy again by watching her be happy. Luca stood at the altar in a dark suit, but his eyes were soft when he looked at her. Behind him, Nico stood as best man, looking uncomfortable in formal wear but proud to be included. Rosa sat in the front row with tears in her eyes and enough food prepared for the reception to feed half the city. When Amara reached the altar, Luca took her hands and whispered, You look beautiful. You clean up pretty well yourself. The ceremony was short and simple. They exchanged rings. She moved the emerald ring to her right hand and accepted a simple wedding band for her left. They made promises to love and protect and challenge each other. They kissed while their small group of friends and family cheered. Afterward, at the reception in the restaurant where Amara worked, Aunt Lila raised her glass of champagne and made a toast. To my niece, who taught me that being strong doesn't mean being alone, and to Luca, who learned that protecting someone means helping them fly, not clipping their wings. And to all of us, for proving that family isn't just who you're born to, it's who you choose to love. As the evening wound down and the last guests headed home, Amara and Luca walked along the harbor hand in hand. The water was calm, reflecting the lights from the boats and the buildings like scattered stars. "Any regrets?" Luca asked. "About which part?" "Any of it, all of it." She thought about the scared woman who had walked past him at a hotel gala 8 months ago. The woman who had been invisible and proud of it. The woman who had thought safety meant being alone. "No regrets," she said. "Just gratitude." For what? For fake cops and men in dark suits and threats that forced me to accept help from a stranger. That's an odd thing to be grateful for. Maybe. But without all of that, I never would have met you. I never would have learned that being protected and being free aren't opposite things. And now? Now I know that the scariest thing isn't loving someone dangerous. It's loving someone so much that you'd rather be in danger with them than safe without them. He stopped walking and turned to face her. "I love you, Mrs. Valenti. I love you too, Mr. Valenti." They kissed there on the harbor, two people who had found each other in the middle of chaos and chosen to build something beautiful together. Behind them, the city hummed with life. Ahead of them, their future stretched out full of possibilities they couldn't yet imagine. But right there in that moment, with the water lapping against the dock and the stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky, they were exactly where they belonged. Together, safe, home.